For our question of the week this week, was I misunderstood in thinking that summer is a bad time for birding? Because I really thought it was all about migration either in the spring or the fall.
You weren't wrong. Spring definitely gives you the most opportunity to see the most birds passing through kind of in a single area. But in the summertime, remember, they were migrating to go to a place to breed. Breeding season is really the sweet spot, right? Adults are feeding their fledglings, nest territories are still active, and birds are vocal at that time of year. So they're harder to see in the trees and the leaf cover and all that kind of stuff, but they're more vocal, especially early in the morning and in forest edge habitats. And that was a bonus for us because our campground had a nice big open field with great edge habitat all the way around. Baxter State Park is full of spruce fir zones that host the boreal breeders that aren't seen in a lot of places elsewhere in Maine. So it's not just about bird numbers. Birding is also about watching those parenting behaviors, hearing food calls, and spotting those juveniles.
Okay, so out of everything that we saw while we were out in the backwoods of Maine in Baxter, what were the top 5 birds that really stood out to you?
Well, the first one is the iconic common loon. By midsummer in Maine, most of their nesting is done and adults are either busy feeding chicks or recovering from those efforts. This grouping behavior that we saw is pretty typical after breeding season or for birds that aren't old enough to breed just yet, and I think that's what we saw here. Their calls are one of the most iconic sounds in the North Woods. What we heard, yodels, tremolos, and wails, are used to claim territory, reunite with mates, or signal alarm like we see here. This is also a great illustration of how they're not very good at flying, so they swim as fast as they can, whether it's above the water or below, to escape a perceived threat. In this case, I was there. There was no threat on the water, but they weren't having it.
They might have seen something underwater that you didn't see.
Maybe. But Maine is one of the last strongholds for loons in the eastern United States. The state has an estimated 4,000 adult loons, and areas like Baxter State Park are really needed to keep that number stable.
Okay, so that was the common loon. What's next?
My second one is the black and white warbler, which we see coming through Massachusetts during migration time, but we were in the heart of their nesting territory, so I saw them multiple times a day, hearing them nonstop with their really high-pitched call. But they nest in deciduous and mixed forest during breeding season throughout the Northeast. They're unique among warblers because they kind of creep up and down the bark of a tree. They might go head first down the bark of a tree like a nuthatch, and it's pretty much the only warbler that does that. And they nest low to the ground. Males sing in a high-pitched wee-see, wee-see sort of song to defend that territory, and one of the earliest arriving warblers in spring, and it continues vocalizing well into the summer.
So that's 2. What's your third bird on your list?
My third is a really secretive bird that's usually really difficult to get good pictures of, and it was an American bittern.
Okay.
And I have some photos we can show where I encountered an American bittern in the marshy area on the edge of the lake while I was kayaking in the morning, and it conveniently went right up into the bare branches to give me some good shots, which is unheard of for American bitterns. But they're a really interesting bird. They breed across southern Canada and the north-central U.S. They're a little smaller than a great blue heron and a little more brown and streaky, but they have that similar body shape as a great blue heron. They're found in freshwater wetlands and marshes, and they like to hide in the tall, emergent reeds and vegetation like cattails and bulrushes. They sit there in the grass and they sway with their head up back and forth to blend in with the breeze or the movement of the flora in the breeze. And their peak breeding vocalizations are from mid-June into late July. It's a very non-sexy sound. They make just kind of like a deep glug sound.
Well, you don't think it's sexy, but the other bitterns apparently do, or they would have gone extinct.
I guess.
From lack of breeding, right?
I guess.
Eyes of the beholder, right? All right, so that's common loon, black and white warbler, American bittern. That's 3. What's number 4 going to be?
Yeah, the shoreline of this lake was chock full of common yellow throat, which is such a fun beautiful bird and a good bird for beginning birders because it's easy to learn the call. It's easy to identify. The only trick is the male and the females look a lot different. But the male has a beautiful bright yellow plumage with a black mask on his face, like a Zorro mask. But these are low foraging birds, highly responsible to pitching or any movement around.
Wait, time out. What do you mean pitching?
Pitching.
Oh.
It's like when birds alarm, they make a little psh, 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 psh sound. So sometimes a little bit of noise like that can help get them interested and come up out of the shrubbery to get a look at what's going on.
Got it. So that's not something you just made up in the forest. That's a real thing.
No, and pitching can elicit a lot of deep feelings about using that as a technique. It should be used sparingly.
I personally feel it's catfishing, but that's just my opinion. That's my opinion.
Maybe cat birding. I don't know.
Yeah, you're lying. You're creating you're creating an illusion to attract a bird.
But it cuts both ways too, because if you pish a little and get the bird to come up, they're more likely than not to see you as the threat and then move away. So you might get yourself a better glimpse in the moment, but in the long term, you might be driving them away too.
Okay. Now that I've completely derailed our topic of conversation. So that's number 4, the common yellowthroat.
Yep. And then lastly, I kept coming across a blue-winged teal hen and her babies, but they always were like just around the bend of the river up in front of me. And as soon as they would see me, they would dart into the weeds. So I didn't get any good pictures of them, but they're just a striking waterfowl that breeds from southern Alaska all the way across Canada into the northern U.S. They've got, they're really mainly seen as migrants in New England than confirmed breeders in our area, but definitely up in northern Maine where we were. And their diet includes, like most ducks, aquatic invertebrates and plant materials, surely an occasional fish if they can get their beak on one of them in shallow water, but that's not the primary part of their diet. And they're among the earliest waterfowl to migrate south at the end of the breeding season, often by late summer.
Okay. And I'm sure I can dig up some pictures of the blue-winged teal, even though you didn't manage to get any on our trip. And if our viewers are wondering where some of our photography comes from, and you haven't checked out our description of our videos, we always explain that if Dustin didn't get a clear shot, because it's not always easy to photograph birds, we go to very specific resources for photography. That would be U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, the national parks, or a variety of organizations like that. Thank you to all the rangers out there who post public domain content. They've got a huge library of resources on that site, and we always give them credit in our description. But I digress. Before we move on and close out this question of the week, which really was to educate me on the fact that birding in the summer is a great opportunity, any final thoughts about birding in the height of summer, Dustin? Or even what made this trip special from that standpoint?
Yeah, birding in the summer can definitely be less predictable because you never know what you're going to find, but that to me is some of the fun of it. Baxter State Park in Maine is a really special place. There's over 200,000 acres of protected and undeveloped land. It is pristine, is the only word I can think of to describe it. But it's been designed that way, specifically to remain wild by its founder and donor, former governor of Maine, Percival Baxter, and it's one of the most pristine birding environments in the whole Northeast. It has a unique habitat mix. There's a lot of different elevation shifts. Oh, that reminds me. The Swainson's thrush should have been one of our top 5. So honorable mention to the Swainson's thrush, which we had great experiences with, and I learned that call in a new way also. But that elevation shift is what makes the habitat great for the Swainson's thrush and other birds that specialize at different specific elevations. It has, as we mentioned, spruce, fir forest, alpine zones, glacial ponds, and lots of wetlands and bogs. But I'd also love to hear from our audience their answer to this question. So if you're watching and you've been out birding this summer during breeding season, what birds have you been seeing? Drop your special highlights in the comments below.